The Life and Death of the Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy.
Distinct from either there appeared a stranger, a young man of remarkably pleasant aspect, who carried in his hand a carpet bag of the smart floral pattern prevalent in such articles at that time. He was ruddy and of a fair countenance, bright-eyed, and slight in build. His advent coincided with the discussion on corn and bread, in which event this history had never been enacted. When he heard Henchard's closing words, "It can't be done," he smiled, impulsively drew out his pocketbook, and wrote down a few words by the aid of the light in the window. "Give this to the mayor at once," he said, handing in his hasty note. Elizabeth Jane had seen his movements and heard the words, which attracted her both by their subject and by their accent, a strange one for those parts. It was quaint and northerly. The Scotchman, as he seemed to be, thanked him, and strolled on in the direction of the three mariners aforesaid, apparently more concerned about the question of an inn than about the fate of his note now that the momentary impulse of writing it was over. Elizabeth Jane saw with some interest the note brought into the dining room and handed to the mayor. Henchard looked at it carelessly, unfolded it with one hand, and glanced it through. Thereupon it was curious to note an unexpected effect. He read the note slowly, and fell into thought, not moody but fitfully intense, as that of a man who has been captured by an idea. The clock struck 9. Elizabeth Jane turned to her companion. "The evening is drawing on, Mother," she said. "What do you propose to do?" She was surprised to find how irresolute her mother had become. "We must get a place to lie down in," she murmured. "I have seen Mr. Henchard, and that's all I wanted to do." "That's enough for tonight at any rate," Elizabeth Jane replied soothingly. "We can think tomorrow what is best to do about him." A recommendation good for one person was probably good for another. "Let's go where the young man has gone to," she said. "He is respectable. What do you say?" Her mother assented, and down the street they went. In the meantime, the mayor's thoughtfulness, engendered by the note as stated, continued to hold him in abstraction, till, whispering to his neighbor to take his place, he found opportunity to leave the chair. This was just after the departure of his wife and Elizabeth. Outside the door of the assembly room he saw the waiter, and beckoning to him, asked who brought the note which had been handed in a quarter of an hour before. "A young man, sir, a sort of traveller. He was a Scotchman seemingly." "Did he say how he had got it?" "He wrote it himself, sir, as he stood outside the window." "Oh, wrote it himself. Is the young man in the hotel?" "No, sir. He went to the Three Mariners, I believe." Seeing this, the mayor took his hat, and, when the waiter had helped him on with a thin holland overcoat, went out and stood under the portico. Very few persons were now in the street, and his eyes, by a sort of attraction, turned and dwelt upon a spot about 100 yards further down. It was the house to which the writer of the note had gone, the Three Mariners, whose two prominent Elizabethan gables, bow window, and passage light could be seen from where he stood. Having kept his eyes on it for a while, he strolled in that direction. A four-centered Tudor arch was over the entrance, and over the arch the signboard, now visible in the rays of an opposite lamp. Hereon, the mariners, who had been represented by the artist as persons of two dimensions only, in other words, flat as a shadow, were standing in a row, in paralyzed attitudes. Being on the sunny side of the street, the three comrades had suffered largely from warping, splitting, fading, and shrinkage, so that they were but a half-invisible film upon the reality of the grain, and knots, and nails, which composed the signboard. Henchard stood without the inn for a few instants. Then, lowering the dignity of his presence as much as possible by buttoning the brown holland coat over his shirt front, and in other ways toning himself down to his ordinary everyday appearance, he entered the inn door.